I'm now going to go through Chapter 10, Number 4. This is a nice question in some ways and not so nice in others. Suppose the position of the nation's long-run aggregate supply curve has not changed, but its long-run equilibrium price level has increased. Which of the following factors might account for this event? So this is nice in the sense that we're getting a feel for shifts in our model. It's not so nice because what I don't like about the structure of the book here and what we're doing is that he's referring to table 10.1 on page 219. There he lists a mere six things that might shift aggregate demand, and that's a little weak. When we think of aggregate demand, not in terms of six things, specific things that might shift it, but we think of aggregate demand in terms of its determinants, of which there are 4 from our national income identity. We're better equipped to handle information that we might come across about our economy and how to incorporate that into our thinking. So, for example, if you look at that table 10-1, he doesn't have any determinant of aggregate demand being people are forced to be sequestered in their homes due to a virus. He doesn't have that. The closest thing he has is increased or decreased security about jobs and future income. Okay, that's really not what happened. What happened is consumption fell. So if you look at our framework in terms of its actual determinants and not just the few things, the 6 things that the author highlights, you're really better off. But we can do both, okay? We can do both. It'll work. So here we go. We're asked again for these purple outcomes. He tells us long-run aggregate supply isn't shifting, so I put a bar over it in purple. He tells us that we observe a higher price level. So what could make that happen? Let's see. A rise in the value of domestic currency relative to other world currencies. What that means is it takes more euros to buy a dollar if the dollar is more valuable. If it takes more euros to buy a dollar, a European resident has a harder time buying our dollars to buy our dollar-denominated goods. So that's something that would decrease aggregate demand, not increase it, which if you follow that along that short-run aggregate supply curve, or the long-run aggregate supply curve for that matter, either way, really we would be talking about short-run, that would push down on the price level over here, not up. So A wouldn't do it. A would not achieve that outcome, and that's why. B, an increase in the quantity of money in circulation. Well, really, that's kind of the opposite of A. If there's all else is held constant and there's more money in circulation, then each dollar buys less. It buys fewer euros, or a euro could buy more dollars. So that exchange rate effect that I'm describing there, where the European euro could buy more dollars, it's the opposite of A. That would increase aggregate demand. Or, bigger picture, if there's more dollars per good, we're talking about inflation. That would fit as well. This is something that we tease out after the test. And again, I think it's better really to think of things in these terms over here, bigger picture things. But when the dollar, there's an increase in the quantity of money in circulation. As I said, the dollar is less valuable. As I mentioned in a prior video, the value of a dollar, dollars can be bought and sold. They're bought for interest rates. B, it is really a reference to increasing the money supply and decreasing interest rates. That makes borrowing cheaper. That means firms can borrow money to invest in capital for less. That increases investment. Households can borrow money to buy homes or to finance things like hot tubs or whatever on credit cards and cars. When those interest rates comes down, demand for those goods and services rises. Simultaneously, if interest rates rise because money is printed, there's an increase of quantity of money in circulation, printed or pulled out of hiding. Keeping your money in savings is less useful. It doesn't reward you as much to save money. So by doing this, our monetary policy makers have discouraged saving. Well, the alternative to saving with our income, we can either save it or we can spend it. If you discourage saving it, you're encouraging spending it. So increases in the money supply are designed to increase consumption and investment. Increases in consumption and investment, they're both under aggregate demand. We're talking about increasing aggregate demand, so it all fits. That would push up on the price level over here. It's more money, each dollar buys less. That's another term for price, dollars per good, so it happens, it works. Cheaper for foreigners to buy our goods, and everything I said about interest rates is true over here as well. I should have pointed to this with the foreigners effect, but everything is true with interest rates as well. So that's B. B is something that would do that. Letter C, an increase in the labor force participation rate. Well, of the 9 determinants over here, again, thinking of these, what does labor force sound like? Is that CIG or AX? No. That's what that L stands for, is labor. That's under aggregate supply. And he says long-run aggregate supply stays still, so that wouldn't be true. That doesn't influence aggregate demand. That influences aggregate supply. So C is not one of our creatures. If aggregate supply, if the labor force increases and aggregate supply long run can move right, or even if it's somehow just a short run effect, that is, that's pushing down on the price level. Letter D, a decrease in taxes. Well, how does that make you feel as a consumer? A decrease in taxes, if we give a decrease in taxes, assuming it's income taxes, the largest share of the government's take, that would be affecting consumption, right? Do you see it anywhere else in here? I mean, you might think of it here, but this is the spending of the government. The taxes we treat as like we just sort of treat that as a different animal, and that's what we're doing now. This is government spending. Affects raising or dropping taxes affects, assuming it's income taxes, households' income, disposable income. Could have business taxes or corporate taxes or things like that are decreased. That could affect investment, but there's nothing over here. So decreasing taxes puts more money in people's pockets, raises disposable income, and so that should increase aggregate demand. And if I increase aggregate demand, look what it should do to the price level. At my point of intersection with short-run aggregate supply or long-run aggregate supply, we would have upward pressure on prices. So D works. The decrease in taxes works. Letter E, a rise in real incomes of countries that are key trading partners of this nation. A rise in real incomes of key trading partners of this nation. So people in Europe have more money in their pockets. They have greater income. What does that sound like of our 9 determinants? They can buy more. They can simply buy more. And increased net exports, because that's exports minus imports, so our exports would rise. Increased net exports is under aggregate demand. That would increase aggregate demand. Increasing aggregate demand, if you follow it through in the short run, it pushes up on prices, and in the long run, it pushes up on prices. So E would work. Letter F, increased long-run economic growth. Well, that's like so easy it's difficult again. He told us that long-run aggregate supply isn't changing. Increased long-run aggregate growth is by definition moving aggregate supply to the right. So he's telling us that can't be because he said in the question that's not what it was. Also, that would push down on prices because it would be our point of intersection would be moving along this aggregate demand curve, and that would push down on prices. So F doesn't work for us. So hopefully that answers that question and sets you up to answer that question in more broad, more real-life events, and also if the directions, if this increase was actually a decrease or something like that on the homework or something, or on the test, that kind of thing. So that's the end of that.